Hello, class. Today we will be looking at the autonomic nervous system, specifically the sympathetic uh, component of the autonomic nervous system. So, the autonomic nervous system is responsible for basically innervating signals from our central nervous system, so our brain and our spinal cord, to our smooth muscles, cardiac muscles, or glands. And this works by having two neurons. Okay, remember these neurons are sending synapses and act as chemical messengers to send information. So they send it by releasing these neurotransmitter. So here we have the preganglionic neuron, which is one of the two neurons involved, and the postganglionic neuron. So it sends from one neuron, which is the preganglionic, and the postganglionic, then that's where it sends to. Okay. Now, when we look at a neuron can actually be distinguished by the type of neurotransmitter. Okay? So I'm just gonna write here neurotransmitter. That's what NT is for. So these neurotransmitters, which are being sent from the image I show you with the preganglionic to the postganglionic, we can determine the type of neuron based on those that are being sent. So if it is sending acetylcholine, ACH, it would be referred to as a cholinergic neuron. If it is adrenergic, it would release norepinephrine. So that type of neuron will basically release a neurotransmitters of norepinephrine if it is adrenergic. So this is very essential for the autonomic nervous system, as it will help distinguish on the type of a neuron that is being sent, and it just basically it gives a much clearer division of which type of neuron is which. Okay, so let us look at the sympathetic nervous component of the autonomic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system of the autonomic nervous system is responsible for our fight and flight response. This specifically occurs during exercise. So sympathetic would be our fight and flight, and our parasympathetic, which we will look on later on, is our rest and digest. But let's look at sympathetic first. So what happens when the sympathetic nervous system is being activated? So here we have our preganglionic neuron and our postganglionic neuron. So these are the two neurons that are involved in the autonomic nervous system in general. So here we have synapses being released from the central nervous system. So either our brain or our spinal cord, but in this case, for the sympathetic, it is at the cell bodies. Okay? So cell bodies in the spinal cord. So synapses from the cell bodies of the spinal cord will be the first process, so number one, and it will then send synapses, it will send signals down to the preganglionic neuron. This will basically go from the central nervous, exit through our spinal nerves from our thoracic 1 to our lumbar of our basically near the back, actually on the back, and it will then exit through those spinal nerves, go to our preganglionic neuron, which is our step 2. This will then send synapses onto the ganglion here. So here between a preganglionic, postganglionic neuron, neurotransmitters of acetylcholine is released for the sympathetic. So it will then go from preganglionic to postganglionic. We then head to step 4, where we have the the signals going through the postganglionic neuron, eventually reaching to step 5, where that signal reaches to our effector. So this could be, as we've learned, the autonomic nervous is smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands. It will go to those effectors. Neurotransmitters will then be released, and for sympathetic fight and flight response, it would be through norepinephrine. So those are the neurotransmitters that are released onto the effectors. However, there is an exception to this in our human physiological body. That would be sweat glands. Sweat glands actually have no innervation for parasympathetic. Therefore, they only release they only release acetylcholine. Okay, so for the rest of the sympathetic, they will release norepinephrine. However, if we are talking specifically with sweat glands, the sympathetic nervous component of sweat glands, it will just release acetylcholine, not norepinephrine. Because as I said, there is no innervation of parasympathetic. So there is no specific neurons of parasympathetic and controlling sweat glands. So it's all just acetylcholine. Either it increases it or it doesn't release it. Okay. Now, let's say we want to stop chemical stimulation. We want these signals to stop. Obviously, we have to stop the neurotransmitters, because this is what is being transmitted between our preganglionic and postganglionic. So we can do this by having, let's say, acetylcholine, right? Let's say here with the sweat glands. The acetylcholine can be broken down by acetylcholinesterase, which is responsible for, breaking down acetylcholine. Okay. And this will generally occur at, let's say, the postsynaptic membrane of the cell body and dendrite. So here's a neuron, right? Cell body, then like the dendrite there. That's where this will be broken down. Or norepinephrine can then be broken down by monoamine oxidase, which is occurs at the synaptic end bulb of the neuron. So that would then be broken down here. I will show you a better illustration of this. Okay, here's a diagram that I quickly drew. So basically, here is a neuron. Here, the dendrites, the cell body, the axons, the synaptic end bulb. The acetylcholine is broken down here by the acetylcholinesterase, and the norepinephrine is broken down here by monoamine oxidase. Okay, I hope that diagram gives a little more clarification on where these neurotransmitters would then be broken down in order to stop a chemical stimulation by removing the neurotransmitters. Just remember that the acetylcholine, I forgot to mention this, is that it is broken down on the postsynaptic membrane and the postganglionic neuron or effector cell. Meaning that, remember that this image over here, this is the postsynaptic neuron. On the membrane of this postsynaptic neuron, that is where the acetylcholine is broken down by the acetylcholinesterase. As well, it is broken down on the effector cell. Okay, thank you for today, and I hope you join our next video, which looks at rest and digest with the parasympathetic nervous system.